Greetings, friends. At least in one of these places. Um, Hopefully, we're live. It looks like that's happening in YouTube, but I could only get to one of three places. And if anyone can hear me, maybe put a note in the chat so I can make sure I'm not only talking to myself, which I actually often do. Don, thank you for writing hello there. It's good to see you. And the real Not Brody. It's a name I love. Um, right on. Sorry to be a little disheveled and technologically challenged. I guess 'tis the season, right? Well, I never like to blame things on any planet apparently moving backwards through our sky. We do know it's a pretty retrograde time. And I thought that might be a good place for us to play here in Storytelling Hour today. Let me show you one of the reasons why. So I'm just going to cast a chart really quick for 11:11 a.m. Pacific time today, December 11th, 2024. All the 11s. So Storytelling Hour. And again, actually the start time was a few minutes late. There's some complications online, but what are you going to do? So yeah, check the chart locally. Aquarius rising. Mercury had just culminated. Have fun to see 8 degrees in 8 minutes. Sagittarius at the midheaven. Perhaps you know that Mercury orbits the sun in 88 Earth days on average. Really important to add on average with everything astronomical, and especially Mercury and Mars. And we can see now Mercury heading retrograde to perfect a trine with Leo Mars, who's been retrograde for some days now. We've been some time into the Jupiter retrograde. We just actually passed the halfway point of that. Do you know how to see that on a chart? And there's kind of this cool thing that's happening, which is you can see Venus opposite Mars with Mercury on the wedge. So I thought these could be some fun things for us to tune into together today. And I want to do this together. So please, if you have any questions or comments to share along the way, please put them in the chat. Let's see where we can go with this. Well, I want to go out to space, and then we'll bring it back to Earth. I'm seeing a lot of names here like Zelnary and Sharon and Don. I certainly well know that you have learned to see these retrograde trips astronomically, which I think is wonderful. I think it's so important, like when we're considering Mars retrograde, for example. Why is Mars retrograde? How often does it happen? How long is it, right? We often hear from astrologers how long it is. But these other things I feel are as important, and they help us connect to the essence of the thing. So let's go back to the screen here. And I'm going to bring up a really wonderful software called Solar Systems Scope, which you can play with online for free at solarsystemscope.com. One word, Solar Systems Scope. At the time when I downloaded their paid version, it was $10. I'm not sure what it is today. I definitely recommend it. You get a high def version. And as you saw, I just pushed a couple buttons to load settings that I prefer here. But this is this moment now. And so it agrees with the chart. I'm going to go back in time 7 minutes to 11:11 here on the 11th day of the 11th. Oh, okay, the 12th month, or was it the 10th? Well, deck 10, December the 12th month, and 11 is in between. So 11's all around. Fantastic. Speaking around, planets go around the sun, or ellipse the sun. Right. You can see here in Solar System Scope where we're looking at the inner solar system, right, or the terrestrial or rocky planets. That's Mars, Earth, Venus, Mercury. How Solar System Scope does a good job of describing the elliptical nature of the planet's orbital paths. And I love that you can see how ridiculously elliptical, or it's called eccentric, Mercury's orbit is. I mean, we should expect the eccentric Mercury to have the most eccentric orbit. And by the way, that is true until we get out to Pluto. And these days I have to push a dwarf planet button to show that. But Pluto's orbital path is even more eccentric, meaning more like elliptical, than Mercury's, meaning that the difference between Pluto's aphelion, or place where Pluto is far from the sun, and perihelion, or place where Pluto is near to the sun, that difference is statistically, or whatever, more extreme than Mercury's. Mercury actually gets closest to the sun in Earth Gemini and furthest away in Sagittarius, which is intriguing to consider, since in the tradition this has long been held, and I think much longer than we knew about this, that Sagittarius is said to be a place of exile for Mercury, and Gemini is said to be one of Mercury's homes, right? Okay, anyway, notice where Mercury is now. And the answer is between Earth and the sun. Now, it was some days ago when that was exact. As I just play with solar system scope, it seems to suggest December 6th. I think it was December 5th. But let's go look in the chart. That's pretty easy to do. So I'm just going to rewind and ask, when was retrograde Mercury conjunct the sun? And the answer was December 5th. 6:18 p.m. Pacific time, 15th degree of Sagittarius. It's where the great attractor lives. And you know what? Let me just check in with y'all to make sure that this is happening on your screen. So can you see my circle going around and circling Mercury and showing his eccentric or elliptical orbit now? Let me stop the screen share and see if that's a yes. Hi, Winter. Hi, Kevin. Nice to have you here. Paul Revere in the house. 1 for Mercury, 2 for Mars. Thanks, Don, for confirming that you were able to see solar system scope. It's always kind of weird in the screen share space. And I've made that mistake of talking at length about something that you can't actually see. So glad to not be doing it now. Mercury retrograde, we say to be particularly careful with things like this, with technology on one hand and communication on another. And that might be particularly true when Mercury is retrograde in Sagittarius. It may be particularly true when that's happening in a strong T square. That's going to be easier to see on the chart, but you can see it here as well. It's important for us to remember that our charts are geocentric, right? I'm going to make this a 0 Aries wheel so we can do this thing a little bit more globally rather than locally. Think globally, act locally, right? I'm going to make this just a little bit more simple to look at here. Okay. So the T-square, of course, that I mentioned is this Sagittarius Mercury Cazimi last week on December 5th, opposite retrograde Gemini Jupiter, with Saturn in Pisces at their T-square. And for those of you in constellations, and I know many of you here are, we'll be looking at midpoint pictures in my Earth astrology class this weekend, and harmonics, okay? Well, this one's pretty easy. The little nerd dial here can show me how close Saturn is to the Mercury, Sun, Jupiter midpoint, and the answer is super close. I guess not close enough for the software to report it as a thing. But generally speaking, when I look to that midpoint picture, I can see that the harmonic expressed is the 4th harmonic. It's squares, right? So the T-square, of course, is in opposition with a planet that squares the 2 planets, or pairs in one of the cases of an opposition, right? Tension and release, I see that as a significant story of tension. And there's a release point at the time, actually, with this trine of Sun, Mercury to Chiron, or the sextile with Jupiter and Chiron, or the trine of the Aquarius moon and Jupiter, or sextile the Aquarius moon with the Mercury cazimi. Right? So I'm always looking for places of tension and release when I play with charts. And so we're going to look at the Mercury Mars trine today. But just know that Mercury, who, that's the Mercury mudra, thrice great Hermes, tends to do things in threes, right? Mercury retrogrades 3 times a year for 3 weeks at a time, generally speaking. Something actually more beautiful and magical to know about Mercury is there are more than 3 Mercury cycles a year. We always have to speak averages with all things astronomical, especially with the very eccentric Mercury. But there are actually high Mercury cycles in a year. And when I say Mercury cycles, what do I mean? I don't mean Mercury orbiting the sun. That's a very important contributor to our experience of Mercury, but it's only a contributor to our experience of Mercury. So it's fun to know that Mercury orbits the sun on average in 88 Earth days. But the way that we're experiencing Mercury in our sky is based more not on that what's called sidereal cycle of Mercury, though I question that term, but the synodic cycle of Mercury. And Mercury has many synodic cycles, like there's a Mercury-Mars synodic cycle. Synodic means meeting, right? So how often does Mercury meet Mars? Well, it depends, by the way, of whether or not Mars is going to retrograde anytime soon or recently has. But typically when we just say synodic cycle, we mean the cycle from Earth's point of view of a particular planet with the sun, right? So the synodic month is the lunation, the month of phases, right? The frequency of moon, sun conjunctions, 29.5 days. When we say Mercury synodic cycle, we're talking about consecutive conjunctions of Mercury with the sun. Kind of. Here's Mercury. I'm the sun. You are the earth. Pi times a year, Mercury will pass between Earth and the sun. Pi being like 3.14 ... or 22 sevenths. So there are 22 of these Mercury sun cycles from Earth's point of view in 7 Earth years. All right, pi cycles per year. It's an amazing thing. And so for Mercury, for the interior decorators who are Mercury and Venus, there are actually 2 types of solar conjunctions. Remember, this is all about from Earth's point of view. So there's this what we call interior conjunction. The more commonly used astronomical term is inferior, which does not mean lesser than, it means below. Like here, Mercury is below the sphere of the sun, closer to Earth. And then superior conjunction, meaning above. I was trained to use then in the shamanic astrology mystery school the term exterior and interior. Okay. I think for our purposes, it's just really important to know not only that am I balding live, but that we're talking about retrograde Mercury conjunct the sun and direct Mercury conjunct the sun. All right. So we'll go look at that in the solar system scope. It'll help bring some of these things into view. For those of you in constellations or who are looking to join constellations, there's kind of a long transmission about Mercury and Mercury cycles that I taught some months ago that you can find there. Okay, so solar system scope. Let's be here again. So this is the Mercury cazimi, cazimi meaning in the heart of it, right? Mercury conjunct the sun. I have here in Astro Gold software retrograde planets indicated by red font. All right, so this means retrograde Mercury conjunct sun. And that just tells me that this is the one where Mercury is between Earth and sun. Here's Mercury here, between the Earth and sun, right? Mercury in a much faster chariot than the Earth, Mercury about the sun in about 88 Earth days, and of course, Earth in about 365, right? So Mercury's whipping around that thing. All right. Well, consecutive conjunctions of Mercury with the sun, and let's say retrograde Mercury Sun conjunctions, in other words, inferior Mercury Sun conjunctions. Consecutive conjunctions of Mercury between Earth and Sun are separated on average by like 116 days. This is a pretty cool one. The next one that will happen in March of 25, which will be like a pith of a year from now, like a third of a year from now. Because as you can see, Venus will be passing us by at that time too. Let's look at that. Why not? So I'm going to go Mercury conjunct Sun. Well, the next Mercury Sun conjunction is Mercury direct. And let's rewind. So this is February 9th, 25, and I can just play in solar system scope, and it's like that. It's not exactly somewhere here, right? And you can see the date at the bottom. So here's February 9th, right? That is Mercury as far from Earth as possible. That's called apogee, right? Far from Earth. Doesn't mean Mercury's particularly far from the sun or close to the sun. Like, that's a whole different trip, and it contributes to the weirdness of why these Mercury sun cycles can be anywhere from like 100 and, well, the average is 116 to 118, but I think it can diverge from those periods as well. But it's just really important to know that direct Mercury conjunct Sun means Mercury's super far away, like impossible to even detect except by probes in space, whatever, or spiritually. But or maybe at that cazimi, because that's called the cazimi as well, the sun is like lensing Mercury's energy to us on Earth. But I just encourage you to understand that when the interior decorators, that's a term I use for the interior planets, Mercury and Venus, are direct and conjunct the sun, they are apogee, far from Earth, and hidden under the beams of the sun for a period of time. Whereas when the planet comes between us and the light, and of course that is only true for who? Moon, Mercury, and Venus, right? So here's this March time when we see Venus retrograde. That's Venus passing Earth by, Mercury retrograde at the same time. We can even get the moon in on this picture. It's kind of like a new moon conjunct Venus, Mercury, and Sun. But let's go back and let's ask the software to show us the next retrograde Mercury Sun conjunction. And that will happen here on March 24th, 2025. Looks like Venus had conjoined the Sun interior shortly before then, March 22nd, 2025. And then we can get a new moon in Aries not long after. That's March 29th, right? So between March 13th, wrong button, sorry. Between March 22nd and a week later on March 29th, we'll have all of these things of Earth, Venus, Sun, Earth, Mercury, Sun, Earth, Moon, Sun. Pretty amazing. And of course, with that first one, the Venus-Sun conjunction happening now close to the Aries point, to the east point. And that's a long story, but I want to go back to this recent one. Of retrograde Mercury conjunct Sun on December 5th. And again, just see that there's that separation between Mercury and Sun, Mercury between Earth and Sun. Remember, Earth is the center of a geocentric chart, and we get Jupiter on the other side and Saturn in between, right? And let's actually just play with the period in this particular case. How long between December 5th, 2024, the next retrograde Mercury Sun conjunction on March 24th? Hey Siri, how many days between December 5th, 2024 and March 24th, 2025?
It's 109 days.
All right, so that, well. Hey Siri, are you spying on me?
No.
Okay, I'm more concerned with you over there. We're talking Mercury. A guy calls himself Gemini, and there's two series responding to me. Okay. There, but that was interesting, right? Because I just told you like 116 to 118 days. That one's 109. Why would this one be particularly short? That's a pretty fun question to ask. I don't know it's one that I want to answer right now. Besides, well, I'll answer it, but I don't want to like go pursue this too far because it would take us a long time. But I encourage you to, in solar system scope or other heliocentric, sun-centered models of the solar system would help you do so. This has everything to do, as I had mentioned before, with Mercury's extremely eccentric, that means elliptical orbit. Okay, let's go back to, well, let me just go here. See in March of 2025, where Mercury's like close to the sun. At that time, Mercury's going to be moving most quickly because Mercury's closest to the sun. That doesn't necessarily mean Mercury's moving most quickly in Earth's sky. It actually, that's not true. Mercury will move fastest through our zodiac. Remember, the zodiac is an earthly thing, right? When Mercury is conjunct the sun, which we saw a direct conjunct the sun, exterior conjunct the sun. We saw that was on February 9th. That will be the time when Mercury like is moving by degree most quickly. All right. When Mercury's passing Earth by, that's when he's moving most quickly through our zodiac backwards or retrograde. And I do want to just show you the example I usually like to show so you can experience why Mercury or why Venus retrograde. Consider from the plant to that star over there as direct motion, right? So see, Mercury's retrograde half the time and direct half the time. Well, that's not true. It is almost true for Pluto, by the way, for a different reason, but also because Pluto's so far away, Mercury is not, right? If you were looking from the stands at this chariot race, Mercury would appear to be retrograde half the time and direct half the time, except for the times when he's coming right at you. That would be a station, right? So station direct, station retrograde, retrograde, station direct, direct, station retrograde, retrograde. You're not looking from the stands. You are in a very fast-moving chariot called Earth, right? So as you are cruising, we get this kind of thing going on. Anyway, as you're cruising, this passing of this faster chariot Mercury past Earth, that's just about 3 weeks long. Hermes, thrice great. And there's about 3 of those passings each year, right? So typically Mercury appears to be direct. What is 116 divided by 7?
116 divided by 7 is approximately.
All right, so like there's like 17 weeks in a Mercury cycle, and 3 of them are retrograde, generally speaking. All right. Cool. Well, let's look at this T-square, and that will just help us go back and forth between the geocentric or Earth-centered chart and the heliocentric image. So I just can't encourage you enough to really ground into the truth that the horizontal line of a chart that's cast using a quadrant house system is the horizon, is the ground. But also, so that's like your local Earth, but it's the center of Earth that is the center of a geocentric, Earth-centered chart. Okay, and we're going to see this like in this same moment that goes Earth, Mercury, Sun, and let me get it back on the screen. It's here. And you know what? I want to set this up in accordance with the so-called natural zodiac. So let me just do that really quick. I'm going to go to December 21st. Let's actually get really specific with it. I'm just going to ask when the sun ingresses Capricorn. And the answer is 1:20 a.m. on December 21st. So let's go there. Okay. And then I can set the Earth's south pole to be leaning towards, well, regardless of how I set this thing up, what does this mean? The sun into Capricorn? It means that Earth's south pole is leaning towards the sun. And that means maximum light in the southern hemisphere and maximum shadow or night in the northern hemisphere. So winter solstice in the northern hemisphere and summer solstice in the southern hemisphere. And very importantly, see where you see the dot of the sun right there, kind of near Namibia, I guess. When the sun ingresses tropical Capricorn, the sun shines directly above Earth's tropic of Capricorn. All right, like later in the day, let's spin the clock a little bit. You'll see the Earth spinning and that light beam just cruising along the Tropic of Capricorn, now getting to Brazil, yada, yada, right? That's the very real astronomy, the beautiful, elegant, and frankly, simple astronomy of the tropical zodiac. It's all about the tropics, which come from tropikos, Greek for turn around, all right? Okay, so here's the sun in Capricorn. And if I then set my solar system scope up so that I put the sun, like quote unquote, above the Earth or oriented up, now I've just set up the so-called natural zodiac, where south is up, north is down, and that means that east is to the left and west is to the right. So now you can see the moon pretty close to that westerly direction. Well, west would be the cusp 0 Libra, south 0 Capricorn, east 0 Aries, north 0 Cancer, right? So I can see that Mars is in like Leo Cancer zone, the moon's in the Virgo zone. This is Capricorn, so Mercury's in like the Sagittarius zone. You see how that works? And actually, let me grab an image. Just had these up. I made a bunch of these this year, and I was sending them out weekly until Maya was born, and then I was not. It's just too much to do. Let me see. I think I have one set up for the solstice. I do. Okay, let me share this with you. Because what I've done here, as you will see, is I have set up the natural zodiac like that. We're a little bit further zoomed out using solar system scope to show more of the solar system out to Jupiter and Saturn. I had to actually put Mercury's name on the screen because when you zoom out in solar system scope and the inner planets start getting smaller, they kind of disappear. But now we can compare that chart to the geocentric chart on the upper right, right? And what I did in solar system scope, as you can see, is I added the 12-spoked wheel, and it's color coded to reflect the elements of the signs, right? And so it's just the same thing I did. I brought it to the solstice moment. I put the sun above, quote unquote, the Earth as far as the screen layout goes. So that means that Earth's south pole is leaning towards the sun because it's the sun ingress tropical Capricorn. And so when I align the sun like oriented above the Earth on the screen, that means I've set up the so-called natural zodiac, which is natural because the Pisces Aries cusp of Earth's zodiac, the directional zodiac, that means the tropical zodiac, is due east of the center of the Earth where we are all one, right? So it is a beautiful image for like a global ascendant, 0 tropical Aries. This is why precession of the equinoxes and the astrological ages is a thing. And this is why the natural zodiac actually does have some astronomical juice, despite the truth that such a statement might trigger astrology students who are traditionally inclined and go to the thema mundi more than to the 0 Aries wheel. I say do both. Okay. So now with the kind of overlay of the 12-spoked wheel, elementally color-coded, we can see that Mars is in Leo at the time of the coming Capricorn solstice, or southstice, as I like to call it, because it's Earth's south pole leaning towards the sun. You can see that Mars is super close to the Cancer cusp there, right here. like at the cusp, in the red side of the blue-red cusp. And we know that Mars is on his way to head back to Cancer, right? You can see very clearly that Jupiter is in the Gemini slice, red for Aries fire, green for Taurus earth, yellow for Gemini air. May our air never be that yellow. Blue for Cancer water, red for Leo fire, etc. You can see Saturn there kind of towards the middle of the Pisces slice. And notice again that all of these are emanating from Earth, from the heart of Earth, not from the sun. Okay? If we considered from the sun's point of view at this time, it looks like Mercury opposite Saturn, generally speaking. That is not in any way happening from Earth's point of view, where it looks much more like a Mercury square Saturn, as you can see that in the Earth-centered chart. All right, so hopefully that just helps us orient the way that we can move back and forth between geocentric, Earth-centered, and heliocentric, sun-centered. see some of you having comments here about Siri being rather suspicious. I hear ya. Winter, I want to ask more about these 2s and 3s and 6s and 7s with you in just a little bit, because I'm intrigued to know what you're getting after there. But let's play a little bit more with planetary proximity and visibility, and then maybe we can tune in together to how can we work with these retrogrades so that they don't just work us. So back to the Mercury cazimi on December 5th, and we see this beautiful mutual reception between Sagittarius Mercury and Gemini Jupiter aligning in opposition with one another. And then Saturn in between. What might that be about? Is there a harshness there? How might we utilize that for a sense of grounding in our quest for truth versus belief? Might be a good part of the opportunity of that. By the way, that theme has been alive so often in charts lately, and from what I'm experienced, so often in life lately. I like that Venus is in Capricorn, kind of contributing in that regard. And I like that we have these wedges, or a full trapezoid, when I bring that Aquarius moon and Aries Chiron into the mix. Let's look at this astronomically. So December 5th at 6:18 p.m. Now that I have this configured to like natural zodiac by going to the solstice moment and placing that Capricorn sun at the Capricorn cusp, like above the earth on this, now I can just rewind time, and it's going to keep the sign orientation that many of us, at least those of us who have studied modern astrology, are very much used to, right? So now I can see that if Capricorn is up, and it's not up from the sun, it's up from the earth, okay? It's like this, and Aries is left. Well, look at how Pisces Neptune is so close to the Aries cusp now, right? Let me zoom way out, and we're going to see that as Earth takes a left to Neptune. And that Neptune's not yet to that place, right? Going there, that's the 0 Aries cusp. We see that Saturn is not there yet either, and we know this is true, right? Well, here's the T-square, the Mercury-Sun conjunction opposite Jupiter, right? With Saturn on the square. Now, if I just draw that shape, I'm making this right triangle, but just draw from Earth. Mercury and Sun are this way, Jupiter's on the opposite side, and to get to Saturn, I have to go in between those two directions of like up and to the right, in other words, Sagittarius, down and to the left, in other words, Gemini, and then left and up a bit would be in between. That's Saturn. It's all vectors, nerds. Sorry, I'll play the nerd here. Okay. Well, what about Mars? So and what about Jupiter as well? Right? Like, it's a really wonderful time to look at, because with Mercury cazimi, we're also very close to the time of Jupiter opposition. Okay, well, Jupiter opposite what? Jupiter opposite the sun. All right, the Sun-Jupiter cycle is about 400 days long. 399, but who's counting? And that's an average number anyway. And the short Jupiter cycles will feature something around Jupiter, perihelion, meaning close to the sun. When Jupiter in his particular 12-ish year transit about the sun is faster in his orbital path. There's much more that contributes to that. Oh, Lorelei, I'm reading that there's been another earthquake, huh? Oh no, on this day of, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. That was a lot. Lorelei, where are you living? So the Sun Jupiter cycle, or let's just say Sun outer planet cycle, doesn't look like this. We need to change roles. Like here, we could do for Mercury or for Venus, you are the Earth, my face is the sun. They come between us, then they go there, right? Like if I wanted to do this with Jupiter, that's going to be a lot trickier. I'd have to go like back behind you, right? I mean, I think I'd have to bring another being into the screen. Can it work if we make you the sun and me the earth? Still no. Just Jupiter can't come between Earth and the sun. Mars can't come in between the Earth and the sun, right? Only the moon, Mercury, and Venus can. And then Mercury has this other amazing thing. Sorry, the moon has this other amazing thing where moon can get to the opposite side of Earth and the sun. Mercury and Venus cannot, right? Like really feel into the beautiful difference of these different types of planets. And Lorelei, I'm seeing that you live in Arcata. Did you feel the earthquake a bunch? Did you see any damage in town around you? We got like iPhone notifications, and I'm sure you did too. But here in the Bay where I live, like big tsunami warnings. And we actually had to cross the Richmond Bridge that day to take Maya to the pediatrician in Marin. And we just about canceled it, but then we got a notification that the tsunami warning itself had been canceled. But that was sketchy. I was in a session and my phone started screaming at me. And now that there's a baby in the house, those things get a little bit scarier than they once did. And that was indeed, as Lorelei shared, on this Mercury Cazimi day, which is a pretty interesting thing to see. You know, I haven't checked it out yet. Isabel suggests we should. But let's look at this Mercury Cazimi on the map, on the astro map, and see if coastal California is indicated in this moment. And the answer is, yeah, it is. So in the moment of Mercury's Cazimi, which was well after the earthquake, by the way, but at that time, Saturn was culminating. Yeah, you can see the midheaven drawn in at least, was culminating here in coastal California. Well, sorry, central coast California. Also Oregon, Washington. That's an intriguing thing to see. It might be more intriguing to look at the moment of the earthquake itself. Does anybody have the time of that earthquake? And I promise we'll go back out to space. So I see, Lorelei, you already wrote 10:20 a.m. Let's go take a look at that. So at that time, I mean, Uranus was near the IC, but not yet at the IC. So that does mean Uranus in the fourth, right? Midheaven is at 20 Scorpio. So placing Uranus pretty close to the IC. That's this line here. But that's the major astrocartographical thing going down. I mean, you'd wonder if that Mars-Uranus paran, this crossing of those two lines, would be an image of earthquake. So anyway, I love to pursue and see if those things are showing up in maps in that way. And then an intriguing thing is to contemplate how we do see that Pisces Saturn at the midheaven during the Mercury Cazimi, which hadn't happened at the time of the earthquake at 10:20 a.m. It wouldn't happen for another 8 hours. But as you've certainly seen following your own personal astrology and probably following collective astrology as well, shit happens before it happens and after it happens. And, it makes things a little challenging as to, predicting when a thing might go down, right? But I really appreciate, Lorelai, you reminding me to take a peek at that. I was like so busy living life that I forgot to tune in with the truth. That, I mean, even though I had like a Mercury Cazimi ceremony that afternoon for myself, I didn't put those two things together. All right, so retrograde planet means Earth is passing that planet by, unless the planet is in a faster car than ours. So retrograde Mercury, retrograde Venus means Mercury, Venus passing Earth. Retrograde Jupiter, retrograde Mars means Earth is passing planet. Now, if Earth is at the center of the chart, and it is, you can see Sun opposite Jupiter as Earth in like the mid-moment of Earth passing Jupiter by. Let's play that game. I'm just going to go to when did Jupiter station retrograde. And by the way, for Jupiter, that happens right around the time that from Earth's point of view, Sun is trine Jupiter. And that was October 9th. So Jupiter then at 21 Gemini, and you'll see the Sun then at about 21 Libra. Clearly not. It's less than the trine. And then let me show you, so October 9th, 24, let me show you Jupiter station direct. And that's February 4th, 25. You see the Sun Jupiter trine. And again, not exact, but pretty close. It might be fun to look at that statistically. I guess I have, but I'm not going to pull that spreadsheet up right now. But I am going to ask our spy friend Siri, how many days between October 9th, 24 and February 4th, 25?
Okay, I found this on the web for how many days between October 9th, 24 and February 4th, 25. Check it out.
Really? Oh. How many days between October 9th and February 4th?
It's 119 days.
Okay. So that's 120, so like 60 being half of that. What is 60 days after October 9th?
It's Monday, December 8th, 2025.
Right, so see that, right? December 7th. Halfway in between the time Jupiter stations retrograde and then later stations direct, we're going to have the Sun opposite Jupiter. But when you see Sun opposite Jupiter in a geocentric chart, I'm hoping you can see that like Earth passing Jupiter by. Right, so let's get to December 9th. There, right? So Sun opposite Jupiter. Earth passing Jupiter by. If we get back to October 9th, there's the beginning of Jupiter retrograde. If you can see from Earth, that's trine. Okay, from Sun, it would be like a sextile, Earth and Jupiter. And I mean, you'll notice this, by the way. Do it from the passenger seat instead of the driver's seat. But when you're passing a car on the highway, like the further away the car, the longer it appears to be moving backwards, though you certainly know it's moving forward. And that it is around this kind of like sextile time when you'll see it like station appear to stop and then start moving backwards. So there's the Sun Jupiter opposition, right? And then here in February, we get to Jupiter station direct. Right now, Earth has finished the passing of Jupiter, right? Well, what about Mars? Where will the center of the Mars retrograde be? And the answer, generally speaking, not exactly speaking, because Mars, especially like Mercury, has a very eccentric orbit. But generally speaking, Sun opposite Mars is the time of Mars perigee, close to Earth, or Earth para Mars, Aries, Aries, I don't know. Like, oh God, close to that guy. Now, Mercury passes us by about every 4 months, right? About 3 times a year, pi times a year. Venus passes us by about every 19 months, every 584 days. Oh, 583.92 days, but who's counting? We are. And with Venus, because Venus's orbit is so circular, and it is, and because Earth's orbit, which is not circular, but is much more circular than orbits like the eccentric Mercury or the chaotic Mars, the Venus-Sun cycle from Earth's point of view is rather regular and harmonic. And the 5-pointed star that you've seen Venus and the Sun paint in Earth's zodiac is a rather regular pentacle. It's not regular, it's not equal-sided, but generally speaking, it's like much more harmonic, as we can expect from Venus, goddess of harmony, right? That's not Mars's gig. So what is it when Earth gets close to Mars? Well, first of all, Elon and the crew are going to launch their ships, like here, right? Like it's so, if you're going to have a mission to Mars, you're not going to launch from Earth at this time when Sun is conjunct Mars, right? And that looks like January 9th. Like, let's just go see on a chart. When does Sun next conjoin Mars? Speak the name of the faster moving planet first. It will help you see time. And the previous one was November 17th, 23 in Scorpio. The next will be January 9th, 26 in Capricorn. Check out how that's with Venus too. That's a pretty cool thing that happens every 6.5 years, which is a Venus, Sun, Mars conjunction. Mercury's not always in on it, but this is like, there's so much aligned to the myths. If you know the story about Venus and Mars being trapped by Hephaestus, who's an image, I'm sure, of Sun. Under the bronze net. That's like, it's right in that wheelhouse, but we're not there anyway. So what I want to show now is Mercury or Mars station retrograde and direct. So Mars stationed retrograde December 6th, just that day after that Mercury cazimi. And that means that at that time, Earth began our passage of Mars, which does not happen that often. The Sun-Mars cycle is the longest synodic cycle. And that can be kind of a tricky thing to deal with, by the way, because, as astrologers, we just think of Pluto as the slowest thing until you get like hip to Haumea, Maki, and out to Eris, Sedna, whatever, right? It's up to you of how deep you want to go. But think of it like this. If you're running around a track, which of the racers will you pass most frequently? And the answer is the slowest one. Which will pass you most frequently? And the answer is the fastest one. So Mercury's passing Earth most frequently. Which will you pass least frequently? or which will pass you least frequently? And the answer is the ones who are running at a similar speed to you. And in space, that means Venus, who, of course, is our interior neighbor, our neighbor towards the light, and Mars, our neighbor on the other side, right? So these are the planets that retrograde least frequently. Venus retrograde for about 40 days and 40 nights every 19 months. And Mars retrograde for a couple months about every 2 years. The Sun-Mars cycle is the one next to Mercury that's kind of the most chaotic, most eccentric, because Mars has a very elliptical orbit as well. All right, so 780 days is the number that the Maya offered for Mars. And I think it's the number we get from modern astronomy as well, as far as the Sun-Mars synodic cycle goes. And then asking Mars, like, how long during that period is Mars retrograde? And, here I think I will dig into my astronomy classes, which I do intend to teach again. They're getting better and better. But I want to do them teaching in such a way where we really get to have daily practices to connect and bring this out of like the headspace and really embody this. So speaking of, we're going to go soon to feet on the ground point of view of this whole thing. So there's that 780 days, okay, 779. And you can see here that I tracked 30 cycles and found anywhere between 776 and 803 Earth days between consecutive Sun-Mars conjunctions in Earth's sky. All right, so, actually stay pretty close to one another. So the further out the planet, and these are just the exterior planets, right? So starting with Mars, and I've gone out to Pluto, as you can see, the shorter the period of time between consecutive sun-planet conjunctions, because the more frequent it will be for Earth to pass that planet by, because they're a slow racer, you see. I'm showing here the amount of days direct in a cycle and the amount of days retrograde. Well, check that out for Mars. It's like a 780-day cycle, and for 707 of those days, Mars is direct. And this is average, and as you can see beneath those, like there's a lot more deviation from the average. And I track 30 cycles. Like there's a lot of cycles to track, right? Build a bunch of spreadsheets and stuff to check this stuff out. I also wanted to see, on average, how many degrees does Mars move through the zodiac between consecutive Sun-Mars conjunctions? And the answer is 408, right? So that's a trip. That means, of course, all the way around the zodiac, 360 degrees. I got this thing wrong a few times because, look below. Jupiter moves like 33 degrees. Jupiter will move like 43 degrees forward and then 10 degrees back. 43 forward, 10 back. As you can see, those are averages. Sometimes 47 degrees forward. Sometimes only 8 3/4 degrees backwards, right? But Jupiter like 33 degrees forward through the zodiac between consecutive Sun-Jupiter conjunctions. Saturn only like 12.5 degrees. Look at Pluto, less than 2 degrees, right? That's like why it takes Pluto so damn long to move through a sign, right? Well, Mars goes all the way around the zodiac and then some. And so I had this at 408 minus 360 would be like 48, right? I had it at like 48 because it just seemed to make sense with the numbers, but no, because Earth and Mars speeds are so like relatively close to one another. I just want to finish this row to show you other things. Like, so Mars is about 426 degrees direct and 16 degrees retrograde. And then the angle between Sun and Mars on average, when Mars either stations retrograde in Earth zodiac or later, having passed Mars by, Earth experiences Mars station direct, the average angle between Sun and Mars at the time of Mars stations is 135 degrees. All right. Do y'all speak harmonic astrology? Or maybe Uranian astrology? Or have you gone out of the traditional 12ness and whole sign aspects? What is the name of 175 degree angle in astrology speak? Winner adds here that Mars goes retrograde the least often, but Venus spends the least amount of time in retrograde motion. Yeah, it's interesting because Venus goes retrograde the second most often, and the Mars retrograde periods on average are 72 days, and for Venus it's 42 days. So anyone, 135 degrees, going once, going 8 times, the sesquiquadrate, right? So a square and a half of a square, 90 plus 45, 135. It's also known as what? The trioctile. Nice, Lorelei. Trioctile, what does that mean? 3/8, right? So a pretty amazing thing here to see that in a way, the Jupiter cycle is connected to the trine by Sun, generally speaking, trine Jupiter when Jupiter stations retrograde. I lost that nerd sheet. Where'd you go? One of these buttons. So for on average, it's 115.5 degrees, not 120. And maybe I could chase that harmonic down, actually. But 120, of course, the trine would be the third harmonic. And Jupiter traditionally is associated with the trine. The trine is said to be the Jupiterian aspect. Well, traditionally, the Martian aspect is the square. And the 8th harmonic, so the trioctile, the 8th of the wheel, is energetically very much connected to the quadrature, to the 4th harmonic, to the squares. Opposition, square, octile, the 22.5 degrees, right? The 16ths. Anytime you have 32nd, 64th, 128th, and that's kind of in the wheelhouse of Uranian astrology. And any of you who are playing with human design or gene keys, I think it's in that too. I am interested in seeing that with that 115.5 degrees average phase between Sun and Jupiter at time of Jupiter stations. Instead of 120, it's not really third harmonic, it's actually 28th harmonic. And 28 is 7 and 4. So Jupiter kind of gets into the septile realm there, which is intriguing. Saturn, 108.8 degrees, so very close to the tradecile or the sesquiquintile, a 5th and a 10th. You wouldn't think of Saturn so much as like a planet that represents 5th harmonic, so that's interesting. But speaking of 7th harmonic, you would think of this for Uranus, and Sun and Uranus are biseptile, 2/7 of the zodiac away from one another when Uranus stations retrograde. So there's, these things are just like astronomy I was chasing down that actually seem to speak. Okay, well, let's put our feet on the ground because I just want to offer this. Retrograde periods are the most transformational. Planets are going to shift either for Mercury and Venus from their time as evening stars, and they go retrograde and they disappear into the flames of the sun, and then they are reborn as morning stars. For the exterior planets, Mars and beyond, they're going to shift from their time at solar opposition. It's similar from, let me show this to you on a chart. So here's this Sun-Jupiter opposition, like just about. All right, let me just go a month before, because it'll be much easier to see that at that time with the Sun in Scorpio and Jupiter in Gemini, that Jupiter, let's put our feet on the ground, is, let me show you, let's go to sunset, not available in the evening sky at the time of sunset. Okay, sun sets, and then sometime later, Jupiter will rise. Not as much later as when the Sun was square Jupiter. That's Jupiter rising in the middle of the night, Sun on the opening square, right? And then Jupiter is in the sky before sunrise. In other words, Jupiter is a morning star. When Sun opposes Jupiter, we shift from this time where, by the way, you can't see Jupiter rise. Why? Because it's sunset. And so the horizons, like in the flames light, right? So there's Jupiter opposition. I'm looking now at December 7th, right? Sun sets here locally and Jupiter's rising. Well, let's go a month later. So now the sun sets and Jupiter is an evening star. But we lose a lot of this in modern astrology, which can tend towards or start with Pluto and invisible planets and nodes, which, by the way, you can learn to see, even though there's nothing there. But when we get back to the old school, we're talking about a great disappearing act. Mercury goes retrograde. We could see him as the evening star, and now he's just gone. Where did he go? And suddenly he's reborn. Now with Mercury particularly, because Mercury can never separate more than 26 degrees from the sun, we don't always get to see Mercury as an evening star or as a morning star. It depends on the cycle. It depends on where on Earth you're looking from. And I'm not just talking about like mountains if you live in a valley or whatever. I'm talking about the way that the signs rise and set. Straight and crooked signs. It's too much to get into now. Think about how just amazing and beautiful and beaming Venus is right now. And I hope you'll watch Venus as much as you can. She's going to describe this amazing dance in our sky over the next few months. And if you really track that and then track the one as an evening star 19 months from now, you'll get to see how incredibly different it is. And you won't get to see this dance again for 5 or cycles, so 8 years from now. Watch it. She'll teach you. She'll initiate you. It's true for Mercury as well, but we just can't see Mercury do his thing as well. Depends on the sign. Depends on where on Earth you're looking from, you know? For the outer planets, for Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, and it stops there, right? Because that's where our eyes stop. They follow a very similar thing. And Sun conjoins them, and Sun passes them by, and they're reborn in the morning sky. For Jupiter, that was like at the time of my daughter's birth in June, you know? And I'm seeing Jupiter in the Pleiades, like reborn then, just when Maya came to Earth. It was super cool. And then I was just watching over time, like Jupiter rising earlier and earlier before the sun, and then getting to the place where like the sun's about to rise and Jupiter's about to set, and now they're like opposite. Like Jupiter's setting at sunrise. And from a particular window in this house, I've just been watching Jupiter at my rising star, which is Aldebaran, with the Pleiades there and Orion kind of chasing them. And it's like an amazing scene. And, it's more dramatic in a sense with Mercury and Venus when they transition retrograde from evening to morning because they disappear in the fires of the sun. For Mars and Jupiter, like you could watch Mars rise or Mars set. You could watch Jupiter rise or Jupiter set. But when the sun's opposite them, you can't see the rising of the settings for some time. It's called the curtailed passage. It was really cool, like having experienced this a few times, to then read in one of Demetra George's ancient astrology books. I think it was volume 1. Ancient Astrology in Theory and Practice by Demetra George. Highly recommended. That was a thing. That was a thing back in the day where they're like this curtailed passage, this sun opposite outer planet time was a big deal. And so I just want to offer and add this if it's not with you already, or just re-emphasize this if it is. Retrograde planet means closest to Earth. And that is a big deal. Probably. Whether you're into a gravitational tidal, which is part of gravity, or electric universe model or something else, proximity seems to be a thing. So just know if you're of the religion that shit's going to go wonky when Mercury's retrograde, that's probably due to Mercury being close. Or it could be. If you're into shit gets wonky when Mars is retrograde, maybe that's because Mars is very close to Earth. The other thing is transformation. What was once an evening star is gone and will become a morning star. Interior planet, Mercury and Venus. What was once a morning star goes through this time where we're not allowed to see them rise or set, and then becomes an evening star. Now, for the outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the Sun-planet conjunction, which is that planet behind the Sun, kind of like a direct Mercury or direct Venus-Sun conjunction, that's likely the most dramatic transformation, because we could see the planet as an evening star, and then kind of like Mercury retrograde or Venus retrograde, they disappear into the flames of the sun. The difference is, instead of that planet passing us by and kind of diving into the sun courageously, like if you know the Inanna story, right? Like Venus goes into the underworld. I believe retrograde Venus is actually a different time. I think Venus going into the Erishkigal's underworld is Venus direct going behind the sun. There's a lot of astronomical reasons why I would suggest that is true. But Venus visiting Enki in the Abzu, I believe that is Venus retrograde and coming between Earth and Sun. So if you know those tales, for me, Enki's Abzu, that underworld, is the near the Earth side of the Sun. And Erishkigal's Kur is the side of the Sun facing away from Earth. The sun spins, so do with that what you will, logistically or linguistically. All right. Anyway, so it's a big deal. Like Mars is the planet that will disappear for the longest stretch of time. For Pluto, it's like the sun just passes Pluto by. For Jupiter, it's about 40 days and 40 nights when the sun chases Jupiter down and Jupiter is revealed. It takes the sun a long time to chase Mars down. And by the way, if you're familiar with the Inanna stories, that's Dumuzid running away, praying to Utu, who is the sun, to turn his legs into antelopes, so he can run, or into serpents so he can slither and hide from the demons that are chasing him down, because like Inanna, Venus like bravely goes into the underworld and Demuzid runs away as fast as he can. I think that's just, well, Venus is faster than the Earth, and Earth is faster than Mars. So the things I would encourage you to add to your retrograde toolkit is, this planet is close. Let me get to know it. And it might be overwhelming. And also, this planet is transforming. How will it help me transform? And if I can choose to run into that rather than run away from that, I will accelerate my own personal path of growth. Okay. Questions, comments, revelations, realizations, ahas, uh-ohs. What do you got, kids? Or should we all just go hang out with our babies? I'm glad to hear that you caught Jupiter setting this morning. Yeah, you're really getting to see Jupiter now in the belt of Venus, which is the pink bit on the horizon opposite the sun at sunrise or sunset. QZ, my pleasure, and thank you. Thank you all for being here, whether you're live with me or tuning in at a time that I currently perceive to be the future. The present of your presence is the greatest gift. If you'd like, I'd like you to like the video. That really helps us work with the algorithm, you know? Like the video, share it around. Hi from Iceland. How to interpret natal Venus retrograde. Oh, so one thing I would just encourage you to add is know that when you were born, Venus was close to you. Closer than for other folks. I will encourage you to know that you were born during a transformational time of Venus. And this is meant, so the Venus principle will transform within you, and you are an agent of transformation in the Venusian regard. When we track Venus cycles and star points, like Susan, typically when you see the 8th solar return, the 16th, 24th, 32nd, 40th, all the multiple 8 solar return charts, you will see the Venus-Sun phase angle realigning. But for those of you born at this amazing transformational time with Venus's retrograde, or has recently stationed direct, or is about to station retrograde, it doesn't show up like that. And you will actually have your multiple 8 solar return charts in potentially different Venus cycles to the one in which you were born. It's a thing I just love to show Venus retrograde folks, because typically you'll just hear these kind of lame things about it's a weak Venus, a debilitated Venus, yada, yada, yada. And Susan, Venus readings are one of my many favorite places to play, specialties, you know, tuning you into the Venus cycle to which you were born, I think will really help you deepen into your knowledge of the power of Venus retrograde and how you're being invited to serve the global goddess's archetypal ascent, as I like to call it. So that being said, why not plug GeminiBrett.com is a wonderful place to come and tune in with me, have a session, and just write, if you wanted to do that specifically, Susan or anyone else, just write Venus and Venus cycles and your intentions, or just share that with me when we come on. GeminiBrett.com/sessions is the way to get right to there. By the way, it's also the place to book a soul song if you're looking to buy a amazingly unique gift for a loved one or for yourself at this solstice time. We actually are having a sale on soul songs, and you can learn more about what soul songs are at geminibrett.com/sessions or right here on my YouTube page. So geminibrett.com/YouTube. Check out the transmission that Eric Deutsch and I made a couple weeks ago about our project. Also, geminibrett.com/song24. Act now. Limited edition. Limited availability, I should say. We have a significant discount going on soul songs right now. So if you want to hear your birth chart interpreted through my production notes and harmony and Eric's beautiful transmission and his beautiful grand piano, he's just a master. We make 12-minute songs of birth charts or marriage charts or, hey, divorce charts, if that'll help you out. Like, I'm here for you, all right? It's so powerful to experience your chart out of all this words and in the body. So many of you know. Winter, that's a really wonderful reflection for me to hear. My sky knowledge has come from Gemini Brett's teachings. Thanks, GB. Thank you, Winter. By the way, Winter, solstice party happening at the house, so I'll holler. Susan, I'm so stoked to hear that the reading is on your New Year's wish list. Let's make it happen. And Nadine, thank you for this reminder. Join Constellations. So if you haven't heard, friends, and many of you have, many of you are in the crew, the School of Astrology has a membership community. It's only $16 a month. We have a different teaching every week. I'm one of the 4 who are presenting monthly or monthly right now as the sun is moving through the signs. Head to geminibrett.com/constellations and you can learn more about the astro herbalism classes that Amala Hall is offering, about the astro embodiment practices that Alyssa Luna is sharing with us, about the Astro Tarot Circle that Phelan Shiva is hostessing, and the presentations that she's giving that tie these great mystical tools of divination, tradition. And then I'm teaching Earth astrology classes. The class this Saturday is going to be on midpoints in harmonic structures. And if that sounds like an interesting tool for you to add to your kit or to explore, then you can receive that class. And all of the ones I've recorded all year, there's hundreds of hours of stuff waiting for you as soon as you join. And it's only $16 a month and you can cancel anytime. So geminibrett.com/constellations, come on in. It's a great way to support my work. If you'd like to just offer a cup of tea, then geminibrett.com/donate is a great place to go. And by the way, like literally simply liking this video and especially sharing it with somebody who you know would enjoy it as well, it really, 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 really helps. And I could use it. We got a baby in the house, you know? All right. Finally, just kind of reflecting in, winter, the sacred numbers of Mercury. So 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and then this rhythm is cool too. It's a little different than that one, Winter. 6, so 7, 6, 7, 7, 7. Wait, no. 7, 6, 7, 7. Oh, 7, 6, 7 is 20. 7. No, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7. 7, 6, 7, 6, 7, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7. Some people start on the 6, 6, 7, 6, 7, 7. But it'll always show up at 33. Mercury, like most, at 29. So if you look at your 7th solar return, then 6 years later at 13, 7 years later at 20, the Hellenistic number for Mercury, the greater cycle, was 20 years. And then 6 years later at 26, 7 years later at 33, which is a really significant time in many, 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 many regards, Christ on the cross and all that. And then at 40, which is an 8, so Venus, it's a really amazing to see that rhythm. And Mercury plays in 33 beat rhythms and subdivided as 7, 6, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7, which is 33. 7, 6, 7, 6, 7, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7, 7, 6, 7, 6, 7. As far as like the polyrhythms, it's amazing. So yeah, 88 Earth days for an average Mercury orbit. And there's 88 keys in the grand piano. It's a fun thing to know. But on Mercury, a solar year, happens in half a day. Mercury spins so slowly with respect to the sun that if you start a year at sunrise, that year will end at sunset. Okay, and then you have a sun. Can't keep turning my arm like this, but I guess sunset is that side. So we're living on the thumbnail. Okay, so we have a sunrise to sunset year, and then we have a sunset to sunrise year on Mercury. So there's a year. If you're living in a particular place of Mercury and you would burn alive. But there's like a day year followed by a night year. How Gemini. So 2 years or orbits for 1 day or rotation, right? And that's the octave, 2 to 1. Somewhere, chestnuts roasting, right? So like that's an octave. And chestnuts, nuts have twice the frequency of chest. Never went there before, but fascinating. Somewhere, where, and somewhere over the rainbow, that's the octave. Like there's twice the amount of cycles, vibrations happening in that second note than the first, the octave, right? And that's a 2 to 1 relationship. With a musical fifth, twinkle, twinkle, little star, twinkle, twinkle, A, B, C, D. So C and D are, and I don't mean the notes, but the letters and ABCD song, they have a relationship with ABCD or twinkle twinkle. That's the 1-5 relationship. It's actually 1 to 3, or really it's 2 to 3. So twinkle twinkle, that like higher note is vibrating at 150% of the lower note, 3 seconds. So that's, and this one comes in, so the 2 for Mercury, 2 years per day. How do I want to do this? Yeah. The 3 to 2 is those 2 years, 2 solar years, 2 orbits of Mercury with respect to the sun are equal to 3 sidereal years, or 3 orbits of Mercury with respect to a faraway star. And by the way, if we retrograde all the way back to why I said I kind of have a hard time with them calling the 88 Earth day orbit of the sun by Mercury the sidereal year, that's the reason. Because that really is a solar year for Mercury. In a sidereal year, Mercury, like an orbit where Mercury could see consecutive, like Sun Pleiades conjunctions, for example. We can't see that. Consecutive Sun Pleiades oppositions. So that would be a sidereal year. And there's 3 of those for every 2 Mercury solar years. So you get 3 over 2, which is the musical fifth. It's like where Pythagorean harmony lives. And you get Mercury, Mercury, Hermes, Hermes. The most amazing stuff ever. I will next year be teaching, I believe, I'm finding the time, deeper dives into these things. Sacred geometry for astrologers, Sacred Harmony for astrologers and Sacred Astronomy for astrologers. So also be on my mailing list if you're not already, GeminiBrett.com to do that. And I'll see you next week for Starry Telling Hour on December 18th. All right, y'all. See you in space.